The Artemis 3 mission and those beyond should be canceled, and we should start again.
The competition between the US and China. Well, that competition is now taking place on a new battleground, outer space.
China is going to the moon. No access to classified information or other special knowledge is required to realize this.
The man who once ran NASA just told Congress that SpaceX cannot get America back to the moon. Not that it will be difficult, not that timelines might slip. He said the architecture is fundamentally broken, and that if we don't scrap the entire plan and start over, China will plant their flag on the lunar surface while American astronauts are still waiting for a rocket that works. His name is Mike Griffin. He's 75 years old, former NASA administrator, decades in launch vehicle design, systems engineering, and national security space. When this man speaks, the entire aerospace industry listens, and what he said in that hearing room changed everything. January 14th, 2025, Rayburn House office building. Lawmakers shuffled papers, checked phones, and settled into the familiar rhythm of another oversight session. Budget lines, schedule updates, cautious reassurances. The Artemis program was years deep. Contracts signed, hardware under construction. Nothing about the agenda suggested disruption. Then Griffin walked in, carrying a thin folder and the weight of a man who had already made up his mind. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, the room quieted. Artemis 3 and the missions after it should be canceled. The current plan will not work. The silence that followed was deafening. A staffer dropped a pen. Nobody moved to pick it up. But here's what made every lawmaker stop breathing.
For a self-declared adversary to occupy a human frontier that we can no longer reach should be understood as an existential concern.
Griffin wasn't just criticizing NASA. He was saying that America's entire lunar strategy, built around SpaceX's Starship, might hand the moon to China. Artemis breaks. Here's the thing about Griffin. He doesn't dramatize. He doesn't posture. He speaks like someone describing a failed stress test. Clinical, precise, devastating. He didn't attack personalities. He didn't blame contractors. He went straight to physics, and physics doesn't negotiate. Artemis, as currently designed, requires the lunar lander to stage from a near rectilinear halo orbit, a distant looping path, tens of thousands of miles from the lunar surface. That orbit exists to accommodate the Gateway station. But here's the catch. It comes at a brutal cost. From that position, a lander must burn roughly 1,000 meters per second of additional delta V just to reach the moon. In propulsion terms, that penalty is severe. Every meter per second demands more propellant, more structure, more insulation, more engines, more margin. Griffin explained how the math cascades. A single-stage lander grows by roughly 25% just to absorb the added velocity. Added mass drives larger tanks. Larger tanks increase surface area. Surface area worsens boil-off. The lander becomes heavier, hotter, more complex, and less forgiving. This is not clever engineering. It is the opposite. And get this.
Have so far chosen to continue on a path that cannot work, and which, even if it could, poses a level of crew risk that should be considered unacceptable.
Artemis relies on extensive in-space refueling using liquid oxygen and liquid methane. Cryogenic propellants that behave poorly in sunlight and vacuum. They absorb heat, build pressure, and must be vented too. Avoid tank rupture. Every venting event bleeds usable propellant. No one could say how many tanker launches would be required. The number wasn't fixed. It depended on boil-off rates, thermal shielding, docking timelines, orbital lighting, all variables still being modeled rather than measured. Griffin emphasized the obvious. None of this had been demonstrated in space at the required scale. Not once. Not with crews waiting. Lawmakers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Aides exchanged glances. Complexity, Griffin said, does not merely add cost, it adds risk. And risk eventually reaches the crew. He paused, then delivered the line that would dominate headlines within the hour. The current plan was unlikely to work, unlikely to the point where he was willing to say it could not work. The alternative. Griffin slid a 53-page document across the table. Diagrams, mass tables, trajectory plots. His alternative was called the dual-launch lunar landing architecture. Basically, two-space, launch system, Block 2 rockets. The first launches Orion with a Centaur upper stage that stays attached all the way to the moon. The second launches the lander with its fuel untouched. They rendezvous in low lunar orbit, not some distant halo. The crew transfers, the lander descends, mission complete. No gateway, no refueling depots, no propellant transfer, no technologies that haven't already flown. But here's the deal. His architecture removes SpaceX entirely from the landing sequence. By the time Griffin reached the building lobby, Bloomberg had already published. Reuters followed minutes later. Clips spread across engineering forums and private group chats. 8 hours later, Elon Musk's thumbs were moving across his phone screen. Griffin's plan, he wrote, was a worse version of Apollo. Starship was designed for scale, capable of supporting a permanently occupied lunar base, even a city. The comment lit up timelines, hardened positions. But Griffin's critique had exposed uncomfortable facts that no amount of Twitter fire could erase. And while Washington argued physics, something far more dangerous was happening on the other side of the world. It was moving faster than anyone wanted to admit. The 2026 gauntlet inside the mega bay at Starbase, floodlights washed Booster 19 in hard white glare. Technicians moved in tight coordination, inspecting weld seams, verifying electrical continuity. The metal still carried the chill of recent cryogenic proof tests. Flight 12 was scheduled for late January 2026.
Elon Musk's SpaceX has carried out a successful test flight of the world's largest and most powerful rocket.
Every integration step fed into a deadline that could not slip. Here's what most people don't understand. By the end of 2026, SpaceX must clear a threshold that goes far beyond test flights. Starship must reach the moon, an uncrewed human landing system mission that places a lunar variant onto the surface and returns to orbit intact. This flight is written into the NASA contract. Without it, astronauts never board. It's not that simple, though. Before that mission can even be scheduled, SpaceX must complete a chain of demonstrations. Version 3, validation, routine orbital insertion, payload deployment, recovery, and landing, and the most demanding requirement, orbital refilling. Starship cannot reach the moon unless it's refueled in orbit. That means coordinated launches, autonomous rendezvous, cryogenic fluid transfer across multiple vehicles. Progress is visible. Depot power module demonstrations complete. Hardware in the loop test beds active. Manufacturing scaling towards serial production. Every weld, every test, every launch points toward one destination. But SpaceX wasn't the only one counting down, and their competitor didn't need congressional approval to move. The silent race. Some analysts in Washington are asking questions that never make the public hearings. What strategic advantages does permanent lunar presence actually provide? What happens to satellite communications and orbital infrastructure if a rival power controls the ultimate high ground? What are the whispered concerns in Pentagon briefings that never reach the press? And that's putting it lightly. The moon isn't just about flags and footprints anymore. It's about positioning. Resources, water ice at the poles. Whoever establishes sustained presence first doesn't just win prestige. They define the rules for everyone who follows. In Tianjin, the Changzheng 10 booster stack rose 32 stories above the assembly floor. Technicians in blue coveralls moved through final system checks, dwarfed by a vehicle built from the ground up for crewed lunar flight. Structural tests wrapped in November, engine trials in December, full-duration static fire planned for March, uncrewed orbital mission to follow, crewed lunar orbit by late 2027, landing attempt 2030, officially. But here's what Western intelligence assessments quietly suggest. If the test program stays clean, 2029 is realistic. 1 year. That's the margin between American victory and arriving second. If you want to follow every twist in this race as it unfolds, hit subscribe now, because what happens next could reshape the century. White House Gambit. January 22nd, 2025. The president signed a 14-page executive order titled Ensuring American Space Superiority. One sentence reshaped everything. Section 2, Item A. Return Americans to the moon through Artemis by 2028, not 2027. 2028. That single year of margin changes everything in spaceflight. SpaceX could now fly an uncrewed mission in 2027, gather real data, fix problems, and attempt a crewed landing the following year without deadline pressure. Elon Musk read the order and responded with one word: cool. But buried deeper was Section 2, Item B. Establish initial elements of a permanent lunar outpost by 2030. 2 years between first landing and sustained presence. By traditional standards, impossible, unless the architecture changes. And Starship is that change. The executive order bought time, but it did not stop the clock. NASA Civil War. 4 days later, everything fractured. Sean Duffy, NASA's acting administrator, appeared on Fox News. When asked if Starship would be ready, he leaned forward. NASA was committed to SpaceX, he said, but also committed to the mission. If other options had to be explored, the agency would consider them. Blue Origin had expressed interest. At SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, engineers stopped mid-task. Screens lit up with the clip. The administrator of NASA, the agency that depended on SpaceX for crew transport, cargo resupply, and the lunar lander, was suggesting they might be replaced. That night, Musk opened X and fired back, blunt, unfiltered, accusing Duffy of incompetence and undermining NASA itself. The post went live at 11:43 p.m. Pacific. By morning, it dominated every trending topic. Inside the White House, patience evaporated. Senior officials viewed the interview as self-sabotage. But here's the reality check. Removing SpaceX from Artemis would cost an estimated $20 billion, 10 times current spending. Congressional approval, nearly impossible. While America argued on cable news, China continued building. No televised fights, no public threats, just steady progress. The final countdown. February 3rd, 2026. Starbase, Texas, clear skies, calm air. At 7:23 a.m. Central, the countdown clock started. T-minus 30 minutes. Propellant loading began. T-minus 10. The road is closed. T-minus 60 seconds. Ignition commands sequenced. 33 Raptor engines came alive. The sound rolled across the Gulf like thunder. 0. Clamps released. Starship rose slowly, then faster, past the sound barrier at 45 seconds. Hot staging at 2 minutes 30. Booster 19 flipped for return. Ship 33 drove upward against a darkening sky. 8 minutes after liftoff, Starship reached orbit. 2 heat shield tiles detached during re-entry. 1 grid fin showed stress fracturing, but the core objectives held. Starship was no longer theoretical. In Tianjin, that same week, another engine completed its test fire, quietly, methodically. In Washington, Jared Isaacman watched Flight 12 from a hotel room. In 2 weeks, he would be confirmed as NASA administrator. His first responsibility was already clear. Griffin walked out of that hearing, knowing something the cameras didn't capture. Math doesn't care about politics. Physics doesn't wait for consensus. And somewhere in China, engineers are working through the night while Americans argue on social media about who should be allowed to try. The race isn't coming, it's already running. And right now, we're not winning. So here's the question that should keep you up at night. What happens if China plants their flag first? Will it matter that we had the technology but couldn't agree on how to use it? Drop your prediction in the comments. 2028 American landing or 2029? Chinese victory? Smash that like button and subscribe, because this story is far from over, and you don't want to miss what comes next.